Interest of time, we're going to go ahead and start working on the some stuff that is just informational, and then we'll get into the action issues when the members come in. I know that my preference is to have a legislator, and I see Mr. Hagman kind of making the way in. So he counts as being in the room, so we will start as a subcommittee. Thank you, Mr. Hagman. Ms. Silverman, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, if we can grab your attention to tab 3, an executive officer statement. We're going to cover 4 areas today. One of the areas is obviously it's been quite an extensive project as far as trying to provide some regulation changes to the seismic mitigation program. And so with that, in tab 16, we actually have the proposed regulations that was actually formulated as a result of the board action last month and the subcommittee discussion that we had on June 18th. So that is enclosed in tab 16. And we're also announcing that we're also having a joint agency workshop. That joint agency workshop would be July 13th, which is Wednesday, the day after the board, from 1 to 4 p.m. at Department of General Services headquarters in West Sacramento at the Ziggurat building. And again, the workshop is going to be hosted by the Office of Public School Construction, Division State Architect, and Department of Education. And obviously this webcast will be a live event, and we'll have it archived on our website for future purposes as well. The other item is the Office of State Audits and Evaluations actually audit the Proposition 1D bond funds. So OSA recently issued the audit report, and last week we did provide a copy of that audit report to the board members. And the last item I wanted to share with you is next month staff is prepared to present informational item related to the project information worksheet, and included is an example of the type of information we're able to capture from this project information worksheet. And so we wanted to graphically illustrate some of the accomplishments of keeping this data and tracking the data as far as what we built over 9,421 classrooms over the 3-year period of collecting some data from 2008 to 2011. And it's just a great informational material as far as outlining to the board the classrooms, the multi-purpose room, cafeteria, kitchen, libraries, what all the facilities that we have built in the program. Also outlining, in that lower chart is the square footage allotments provided for classrooms and multi-purpose room and ancillary facilities as well. So we're looking forward to presenting more of this kind of information in the future to kind of highlight some of the accomplishments this program has provided. With that, I'll open up to any questions.
I forget. Okay, I'm just wondering what would be considered an other building?
Good question. It's actually a category we have on the worksheet itself, and it could be classified as another subsidiary facility, and it's pretty much up to the district to disclose that. Some of the information we collected, like in this 3-year span, which represents 567 projects, some of the districts have disclosed what those facilities are.
So they could fit in the categories then? Because I'm trying to think what else would be there besides the ones you listed. So maybe just they stuck another, they didn't delineate, it probably fits in one of those other categories.
Right, well, yeah, exactly. And we can provide a little bit more detailed information. It's just we were actually requested to put this information together rather quickly, and so we can provide a little bit more definitive information what is the other category represents.
One of the issues, Mr. Hagman, is what are we doing with this information that we're collecting? So I thought it'd be informational for us. It'd be good for us to see what it is that's out there that's available to us based on what districts are submitting. Any other questions? Comments from the public? Okay, hearing none. Next item that we can dispense with
is the financials on tab 5.
Thank you.
So on tab 5 is we've been highlighting with the board status of some of the fund releases we've been providing to school districts as we are liquidating the cash through the various bond sales. And on page 89, March 2009, we actually have dispensed of the entire bond sale there. We originally received $528 million, and we actually released the remaining funds this last month. And so, again, we wanted to highlight that activity. And then in the middle category, the April 2009 bond, we received over $1.4 billion. We released $6.5 million, And so we still have $57.5 million available in that bond category. And in your lower chart, we had received general obligation bonds and commercial paper exceeding $500 million, and we dispersed $17.5 million last month. And we still have a balance of $57.7 million. And if I direct your attention to page 90, on the top of the page is we actually had dispersed in that category no funds, although the original appropriation was $111 million. We still have a balance of $27.5 million in that category. In the middle chart is the March 2010 bond sale. We received over $1.3 billion. We dispersed $3.2 million. We still have a bond proceed balance of $190.5 million. And then November 2010 was the bond sale that we received last year. Tail end of last year, we received nearly $1.5 billion. We have liquidated $61.5 million last month. There's still $78.8 million available that we still are processing fund releases for. There's an illustration of the entire activity for the month of May. We've liquidated $88.8 million, and that's on page 91. And again, on page 92 is just a chart illustrating graphically how much money is basically sitting in our account. We have $412 million as of May 31st through the various bond categories. And then on page 93, it's an illustration of when projects are set to expire, which we call time limit on fund release. Again, although we have been liquidating a lot of projects or a lot of funds as related to the priorities and funding, in total, these are the projects that are set to expire. And so that's a graphic illustration. Even for June, we have one project that's set to expire for $10 million. And likewise, one of the biggest category, which represents the 18-month requirement that we dispersed back in April of 2010, there still is $190 million committed in that 18-month category, and that represents 27 projects. So again, we would be showing those liquidations as we process fund releases, but as we speak today, there's still $190 million in that category.
Ms. Moore.
I think this information is really good. I was wondering if we could also have, maybe going forward, when funding does come, or when dollars do come back to the program, that we have a running tab of that so that we know actually how much has come back from these. Either they weren't perfected or they were withdrawn. And then as we move forward to our 2 funding cycles, we know what will be added.
We could certainly do that. We'll add another illustration.
Mr. Harvey.
Thank you. I had a very similar request. Thank you for that. What I'm trying to understand is on page 93, these are the projects that have to cure by a certain time because they're on that 18-month clock. Can you remind me how much difference there is between what we saw last month for the October spike and what we show this month? Are people slowly coming in, or are they still lying in the weeds? I'm trying to get an idea of how real that number may be. We may not know until October, I guess.
I believe, I'm just speaking, last month we actually did liquidate some funds, $6.5 million in that particular category. So it was mixed up with other priorities of funding. A good portion of those funds, $400 million, was dispersed immediately as a result of that initial priorities round, but there was still $900 million that were apportioned in April of 2010 that had the 18-month time clock. So respectively, it was what we liquidated in that 18-month category last month was only $6.5 million.
And in our priority and funding round that we're looking back on, we really had, 100%, or did we have anybody not cure in that category?
We only had one project that didn't cure in that category, so we had over a 99% success rate. And so what's represented in that particular bond sale, we're still liquidating projects, and so that's why there still shows a balance in November 2010. When we come back in a few weeks, the amounts would be liquidated, not entirely because there's still money associated with the charter program that haven't come in.
Okay, and then I guess we won't really see a real drawdown of that 412 you allude to until we go back out on another priority and funding round.
Well, these projects have until October to come in. And so you're talking about that big spike of $190 million.
Actually, I was going back to the 412 on an earlier page. It's on page 92.
Right.
I was looking for the next opportunity to make a big bite out of that.
Yeah, we should show another drawdown in the funds available. I think the most significant drawdown has occurred already in the priorities of funding.
Right.
So I imagine somewhere in the area of about another 30 to 40 million drawdown because we still have still processing fund
Okay.
releases. But so that will be almost the last of that set aside money. But there's also other money set aside for the charter school program that haven't been liquidated.
Got it. And my final question, we don't know what that ultimate spike will be in October, but whatever money is there, the board will have some discretion to put it in categories that they believe are needed, necessary, important.
That's correct. And then, I think Ms. Moore shared as well, her concern about having an illustration of how much cash is really available in the program for future rounds. So we'll definitely tie down that illustration next month as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? We can go to tab 6. Is there status of funds?
Is there any public comment on this item? Hearing none, moving on to tab 6. Thank you.
Tab 6 is our status of funds. It's just, again, an illustration of the bond authority that's available in the various propositions, and that also summarizes the activity of items that we process at this board in the consent agenda. On the top categories, Proposition 1D, the voters authorized $7.3 billion. We do show activity in new construction of one project of $1.9 million. We had 18 modernization projects of $25.8 million. We actually have a high-performance project, which is one project here. We actually reflect also a rescission. So in total, in Proposition 1D, we processed $25 million. That represents 20 projects this month. And in your middle category is Proposition 55. We actually provided 8 projects with new construction unfunded approvals, and we have also some modernization activity. And we have one rescission in the charter school program. So the net result is $10.5 million positive going on in that category. And then Proposition 47, we actually had opportunity to provide a fund switch from 1D to 47. That's a summary of that activity. And so in total this month we're providing in unfunded approvals $12.6 million, which represents 30 projects. And then on page 95, if I can draw your attention to the center of the page, we're somewhat towards the end of our processing of emergency repair program projects. We're processing 31 projects this month, representing $13.2 million. And so that brings the drawdown. We still only have about $560,000 available in emergency repair program. And so what we're planning to do is provide a future item to the board to kind of summarize the closeout of the emergency repair program to some extent as how much authority is still available, settlement authority is still available, and what provides some board some options on how we could get to the next grouping of projects. So we'll be presenting that item in the shortcoming. And on page 96, thank you, Ms. Moore, for the suggestion. We actually put one illustration together representing the entire bonds, active bonds, 1D, 55, and 47. The collective bond authority from all 3 propositions represent over $28 billion. And with that, the blue shaded area represents the projects that were apportioned in all 3 respective categories. And we have 85.8% of the bond authority still available. And we have, in the maroon shaded area, 7.5% have been committed to unfunded approvals, and 6.7% of the bond authority still remains out of all 3 propositions, which represents over $1.9 billion. And actually, that would actually save us from going through 97, 98, and 100. And then we could jump to page 100. Again, the new construction bond authority, just highlighting to the board that we still have over 92.8 of the new construction bond authority has been apportioned. There's 3.8 left of unfunded approvals on the unfunded list, and 3.4% of bond authority, or $503 million remaining for new construction. And then the last illustrations on page 101, again, that represents the Emergency Repair Program Settlement Authority. We have a slight sliver, which represents the remaining settlement authority, and we'll be bringing that item back to the board for future discussion. With that, I'll open any questions.
On that last graph on 101 and the whole subject of the Williamson Act settlement, is it possible going forward to consider the unfunded approvals for a future bond? I mean, this is now general fund dependent, and we have not had, because of our situation, any dollars for a number of years. These were obviously perceived as health and safety issues. They're important things to fix, and we've not really ever had the ability to say, here's another funding source. Is it possible that that large 450 some odd million, which is not even, it's more than half of what the settlement amount was, could be somehow folded into a bond?
That's general fund. It would have to be an appropriation from the general fund.
You can't.
You want to comment on that?
I don't understand. The settlement was general fund. I was looking to substitute. Come on, Chris, find a way, buddy. Where are we going to find this money?
Department of Finance, or Chris Ferguson, Department of Finance. The funding source specified in statutes for this program, the Emergency Repair Program, is Proposition 98 reversion account. It's specific to the statutes. The bonds are specific to whatever the voters approve and whatever's negotiated between the legislature and the various parties, whatever's presented to the administration. At that point, yes, it could be considered for a future bond, but again, that would be entirely dependent on future bond negotiations.
And also, it sounds like a change in statute.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Again, I do want to highlight that the Williams settlement approved a settlement of up to $800 million from that account. It's a set, determined amount.
I understand. Thank you. I think we all in good faith would like to fund it. It was simply a matter of where are we likely to do it. But you've clarified that. Thank you, Chris.
Hello, we're joined by our two senators. So I believe we now have a quorum. Yes, we understand Mr. Buchanan and Ms. County are on that right now.
We'll call those establishment.
So we can start with the quorum.
Senator Lowenthal. Here. Senator Hancock. Here. Assemblymember Brownlee. Assemblymember Buchanan. Assemblymember Hagman. Here. Scott Harvey. Present. Kathleen Moore. Here. Pedro Reyes. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you.
May I seek an amendment to that? And I hope, Mr. Chair, we have a discussion when you deem it appropriate to perhaps think in terms of adding what I would say are non-controversial items to the consent calendar. And in that, without objection, I would suggest we could add items tab 10 and 11 to the consent calendar. There seems to be no objection. Staff is agreeing with the district's request. In an effort to expedite the agenda, I would simply suggest that as a possible action.
Any objections? Okay, great. Any comments? Any comments from the public? So, Mr. Hagman, are you okay with that? Okay. So it's been moved and second. All in favor? Roll call.
Senator Lowenthal. Yeah. Senator
And then the walk of the heat. So yes. 36. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Senator Hancock. Assemblymember Hagman. Scott Harvey.
Aye.
Kathleen Moore. Pedro Reyes.
Aye.
Carries.
Thank you. And if in the future we can do that, we have the consent that we're all familiar with, and there's going to be some action items that are non-controversial. If we can do it as a special consent just to move forward, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, we can go back to the minutes.
Been moved.
Second?
Comments from the public? Mr. Gonzalez had a comment on this?
Thank you, sir. Richard Gonzalez of Richard Gonzalez and Associates. At the last meeting, with regards to the cash management report on the re-review of financial hardships, I had made a comment about perceiving that the maximum 6-month funds may be available under a re-review process was not included in the regulations. And you shared with me that you perceived that those were in there, and I asked if that might be included in the minutes.
I think your comments are duly noted. I think the transcripts will cover that area, what was actually there. The purpose of the minutes is to pick up the essence of the conversation. And as we all know, there are times when issues that folks feel very close to not always picked up. And I think Ms. Hancock was one that came back and some of the issues to clarification. So we'll take a look at the transcripts and see what was there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other comments? It's been moved in second. Roll call.
Senator Lowenthal. Senator Hancock. Assemblymember Hagman. Scott Harvey. Kathleen Moore. Pedro Reyes.
Aye.
Carried.
Thank you. We will now move to a closed session to have a conversation on potential litigation issues, and then we will come back and report out, and we will move to a closed session to see whether or not we need to have a closed session for potential litigation. And if we do, we will report it out. Okay? So if you please clear the room quickly so we can move to that. I think the only staff that will stay is our counsel, please, who will serve as the minute taker. Yeah. We're all back, right? I'll give him a few minutes to sit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I'll wait till. I think she's ready. Are you ready? No. Okay. Okay, welcome back. Thank you. The board met in closed session to determine whether or not we should meet in closed session to look at potential litigation issues. And the decision was made to, yes, meet in closed session, and we discussed potential litigation issues. And I think that's what I need to report. Thank you, Counselor. Now that we do have a quorum, I'd like to go back and clean up some items. Senator Runner has requested that we pull item 15, and without objection from the board, we'll do so. And LYNWOOD has been pulled, and Assemblymember Brownlee has requested that Centinela Valley be pulled from the agenda for a later date, and unless there's objections from the board, we will do so. Mr. Harvey?
A point of clarification on item 8, has that been permanently pulled as opposed to carrying over?
It's my understanding it has, and I have a letter that says so.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And we are going to discuss item 9 at a future time, Centinela.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Silverman, where do we need to be? I'm sorry? Tab 7. Butte County Office of Education, the appeals items. Staff will present. It's not on. No? IT room, we need help on the mics, please. Without objection from the board, can he come and sit? Staff can sit up in the dais just so we have this moving. Go ahead, go to the middle. Yeah. Assuming that's also working.
How's that? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, tab 7. Once again, I'm Brian LaPasse with the Office of Public School Construction. Tab 7 is the Butte County Office of Education request to change its scope on a new construction project that would add a library to the project that was not part of the original scope of the project. The original project as approved included 6 classrooms, school administration, resource specialist program rooms, speech rooms, and restrooms. The library was excluded for budgetary reasons at the time of design. Because the library was not part of the project as approved, adding it now would be inconsistent with the full and final provisions contained in Education Code that's noted in the authority section. Also, with regards to financial hardship savings, we received information that indicates there will be some savings in this project, hence the request to add the library. However, we have a regulation section, 1859.103, stipulates that financial hardship savings can be used one of two ways. It can be either returned to the state, or it can be used as match on another financial hardship project within the next 3 years. So it would also violate that if we were to allow them to use it to build this library. And it would really kind of substantially change the way that we deal with financial hardship savings in projects in the past, and the way that our regulations stipulate the savings should be used. The other thing with the savings is if it's returned to the state, it could be used to fund other projects on the unfunded list that we have currently, which would carry other projects. Other options for the district is they do have new construction eligibility remaining, and they would be able to use that to request funding for classrooms, and they could use that money to also build a library on the campus. But in considering all this information, we feel that we can't support the district's request, and we're recommending denial of it.
Thank you.
I'll answer any questions you have.
Mr. Harvey.
Clarification on your last statement about other funding options. That's a separate option from using the savings within 3 years to perhaps build a library?
They could be combined. They do have eligibility on file which they could use, and they could, they'd have to request classrooms to be built. They do have eligibility in each of their 2 high school attendance areas, so they have lots of eligibility to use, and they could use those funds not just to build the classrooms, but also to build a library, if they were able to design and construct.
Mr. Hagman.
But that would mean they start at the list for anybody else who's unfunded at this point as well, right? They don't just go in front of the line and keep their savings. That savings from the project has to follow the current code that we have in place, unless they come, because that's hardship money, right? So they have to come
Right.
up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I see folks standing. I presume you're from Butte County.
Could I just ask, this is just a question of clarification. It says you refer several times to the SFP. What is that?
That's our school facility program, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's our entire program.
I know. I don't think it was ever spelled out.
If you have a seat, please, and allow Butte County folks to.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Boltema, and I serve as the Assistant Superintendent for Administrative Services at Butte County Office of Education. This project is very important to the students of Butte County. The program that this project will house our charter school and also our countywide special education adult transition program. Currently, those programs are in rented facilities that were never designed specifically for educational purposes. BCOE is not asking for any additional money for this additional scope. We have, frankly, received more favorable bids with the value engineering work we did up front and also in the planning stage, and we believe that we can provide a modular library building within the full and final contribution from the state. We would note that when we were in the planning stage for this project, which was conducted almost 3.5–4 years ago, we didn't think we'd be able to fund a library. So our intent was to provide for minimal library services. However, we believe with these savings we can actually provide for more adequate library services. Our plans do show a location for a future library building as well. In response to the OPSC staff recommendation, a couple of things we'd like to note as counterpoints. We believe the authority citing Education Code Section 17070.63a is simply misapplied. We are not asking for additional funds, and we would be in compliance with the full and complete and final contribution for the project. As related to the school facility program regulation, we have not at this point declared any savings as of yet in the project. And as for the decision that this would be precedent setting, we would actually point to the Victor Valley Union High School decision in 2007, where staff recommended for approval of a change in scope to increase the size of a gymnasium. Other funding options for the library, frankly, are not realistic. The size of the current lot that we have for this project really wouldn't allow for additional classrooms and the library. And again, originally in the schematic we had a site for a library for future purposes. We believe this change in scope has a real benefit to the students and the faculty by providing a full education and a complete school. We believe this change in scope represents fiscal responsibility by providing a library during a larger construction phase, which would simply be at a lesser cost if we were to do it now than if we were to do it at a later point in time. We believe this change in scope represents the best use of taxpayer money to provide a quality educational facility within the resources we've been provided. And with that said, we ask for your support on this appeal. We believe the appeal has merit and it's the right thing to do for students. So we want to thank you for your consideration of our appeal.
Board members, question, Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I'll start off with, I think we all agree that we would love to provide more facilities with the extra dollars. A lot of times our bureaucracy makes it where our hands are tied in certain policy directions and we're a litigious state, and it could go many different directions. And I would guess point the question to our legal counsel. Is there room for interpretation here, or this is a pretty much the policy that's been set? I know with different funds, savings can be applied different ways, but this is hardship dollars that we pay out, correct?
As it's currently structured, the financial hardship savings return back to the fund to reimburse the state for its portion of the project, what it's putting up for the contribution to the project.
The new construction is a different kind of policy, right? If someone has savings there.
If it's the SFP, if it's not the hardship, there the savings can be applied to another high priority, high capital outlay project.
Within the district.
Within the district, correct.
So
the district can put that into an account and use that for another project.
And this is pretty much set up in statute and in our policies as far as what we have?
That's correct.
So in order to change that policy, what would the procedures be? A statute change? Be legislative, or would that be bond? This is bond money, so.
That would have to look at how much that could be done through whether that would require legislation or regulation change.
And I guess to summarize, even if we wanted to, do you see any way we could legally do this?
Not at this time, no.
Thank you.
Well, I have a different, probably, approach. While I appreciate the concern about savings, as we all know, we do like to have complete schools built in California. And when this project first came forward to the Department of Education, it had a conceptual, in its conceptual stage, it had a library as part of the project for the future. And we questioned that because we want to ensure that library services, as required by Ed Code, are available to students. And because of what they believe the financial situation of this project, they had classrooms, administration, and a library. That the place that they could cut was at the library. We would maintain that it conceptually was part of the project, and that indeed they are providing library services to this in this project, because we had to ensure that that was occurring. And it's occurring, it will have to occur in the classroom areas. Now in the Victorville, is it Victorville? Victor Valley?
Victor Valley.
We as a board approved in a similar circumstance a scope change for additional gymnasium area. And if we would look at this creatively, I think that we could say a scope change for additional library service area for this project. And the reason that I indicate that is these students, while we say, well, maybe if future students could generate the eligibility to build a library, it's these students that we shortchange with not having a full library. They may have limited library services, but they don't have the benefit of a full library. And the real reality is we probably will never return to place that library. This is the opportunity. And I don't know if we need to look at it as expenditure of savings, but actually a change of scope for extension of the services, the library services that were in the project.
Legal opinion on that?
The only thing staff's hands are somewhat tied here because the application process requires that the applicant come in with plans that are approved by the architect, plans that are approved through the Department of Education, and that's the plans that we're funding. And when we're looking at now, we're going to change the plans after it's been funded. That's the issue that staff's dealing with, why they're not able to accommodate.
What's the difference with that and the Victorville scope change?
I am not completely up to speed on the Victorville issue.
Staff may be
but
familiar
staff
with
might be
Victorville.
able to give you some background on it.
There are a few similarities, I suppose, but the main difference in the Victor Valley project is that the gymnasium that they enlarged was actually in the approved project. It was in the plans that we approved initially, and they expanded the size of it. The difference with the Butte COE is that the library was not contained in the plans that were approved. So that's the main difference that we see.
Conceptually, the library is in the project in that the services are being delivered through the classrooms. That's what they have to do because library services are required in a school. And so those services are being delivered through the classroom area for this project. You could provide this, you could look at the same logic of extending the gymnasium, which also had to go back through DSA. It was not, it did not exist at the time. So I think there's some precedence there. I can see where the staff position. I'm just looking at a potential different position on that I think ultimately in the end benefits these students in this time.
I have a creative idea, Mr. Chair. If you're basically changing the size of a building versus adding additional facilities that are not on the approved plan, and we have precedent on that, is there a possibility, I don't know what your time frame on this is, to possibly come back with an enlarged classroom, part of it being dedicated toward your library facilities, and when that would stay within the same realm?
I can just speak to the timeline. We've already broken ground on this project, and I would have to turn to some of our architects to define whether or not we could make that work or not.
The problem I see here is once you start doing regulations and rules on the fly, and our staff is not there to supervise these building projects. They're there to fill out a formula, get approval, move on, and once you start doing that, it makes things very critical for us to defend ourselves in every decision, and both legally and also policy-wise. I could see as you start into a project 2 or 3 years down the road, I don't think there's probably not a project that hasn't changed architecturally or maybe, switch this room over here or that, those type of things, and those have a standard process, I believe, that we, go through and say, yeah, you still have the scope. But once you start adding physical buildings to a site, that really changed the whole ballgame in certain regards. And we could look at that as a board later on to change rules and regulations that we follow. But to do that prospectively versus prospectively, it becomes an issue. And I'm wondering on the creative side is, like I said, this is a portable building that you declared.
We're simply proposing with the dollars we believe we could put in a modular. So we're certainly not asking for a stick building. We're looking for something that is.
So it's a modular building that maybe with, I don't know if this even flies legally as well with the codes, but if you already had that, if you expand another one of the modular, and then that becomes a large classroom, and then later the district changes its use. I don't know if there's anything different on that. That's just an idea.
Staff, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I don't know that the school district hasn't approved on that, hasn't agreed to that, but is there concern? I guess Mr. Hagman, my concern with that is, when somebody comes in and makes a $99 donation, so they don't have to show the $100 in a report. And we're sort of, as a board, telling somebody, hey, make it $99.50 so that it doesn't show up. So as a board, I'm kind of uncomfortable with that.
I'm not advocating for getting around the rules. What I'm trying to do is, if there's a clear policy on the books already, in one instance, is there, and there's clear policy that you have followed in the past, in previous boards, for the recuperation of dollars, because that was not part of the approved plan. I don't see another way of doing it.
Yeah. Mr. Harvey.
As a follow-up, I think we all are sympathetic to what Ms. Moore is saying, but I think tragically we don't have a way of doing it neatly. And again, the key word I heard from staff on the Victorville situation was that the use started as a gymnasium, and the scope was to change the continued use into something larger. What you're suggesting is a bit more of a slippery slope by saying take something that isn't a library, call it that. It's really a classroom. And I think that is unsettling precedent because you can suddenly find creative ways to do things that I think are probably not in the public's interest. So for me, that's the distinction. If this were the same use and you simply wanted to say, gosh, we didn't make it large enough because we were concerned about budget, then I would be much more sympathetic to adding to the scope and allowing you to use the savings. Can I ask you, is there if this district had included the library in its project, the bids came in lower than what would have allowed them to build their project, do they have the opportunity to amend their definition of the project or fund it to a certain level and then fall back? I'm looking for a way for districts in the future, if they really want something, how can they build it into their project definition so that if circumstances change going forward, they can change the scope without having to do what we're doing here, which is to deny them and make them come back at some future time.
We have in the past published change of scope criteria in our publications that we have for the public, and we do have defined things you can and can't do. I can go over them if you'd like, but as far as what you're talking about, I think they could do alternates and things like that. If they over design, take things out of the project, for instance, there's ways to do those things. But in this case, it's something that they're adding to the project that wasn't in there previously. That's not something that's on our list of things we can accommodate.
But again, going forward, I'm trying to help districts understand what is the best way to preserve their rights for something like this in the future. And it may be shoot for the stars, have something a little more like your complete campus, and then if your budget doesn't allow you to do it, you make some hard choices, but at least you've created the foundation for you to make some policy decisions going forward. Juan, I'm leading them incorrectly. I don't want people to go the wrong way.
Mr. Harvey, that is an option that districts currently have right now. Part of the guidelines that Mr. LaPaz mentioned do provide some provisions for reductions to minimum essential facilities, such as a library. Of course, those kinds of changes would have to be approved by the Department of Education as well as the Division of State Architect. There is also some provisions for deletion of MEFs on a case-by-case. So we have some guidelines that we have published for reductions and deletions of minimal essential facilities such as libraries. So had the district included the library, not had enough money to move forward, there is a mechanism to reduce the scope in that situation.
Thank you. Senator Hancock.
I think that I do agree with Assemblymember Hagman in terms of where we are today. I was wondering if we could perhaps get a copy of those rules of how people could go about changing the scope when they get those kinds of indications, because the board might want to go over those at a later date and consider clarifications or some differences in a policy that isn't the policy that's before us today in terms of policy and practice.
You have a colleague that came up. Is there an additional information that wants to be?
Oh, Regina Bills-Dacon with NTD Architecture. I just wanted to add that in hindsight, we've realized that we would have had the option to add the additive or deductive alternate, but the mindset that we had at the time that we designed this project, everything had to be value engineered, and so we didn't realize that that was really something that would even be an option in the future. At this point, we're realizing that we either get the library today or we're probably not going to realize it in the future.
Mr. Hagler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I always look for creative things. I want these school districts to look for value engineering and save the taxpayer dollars all the time if they can. And the other alternative is them to plan out a super school but not get halfway through. I don't want that happening either, because then we tie up funds that we cannot get to the other areas. So I see the dilemma on both sides. Unfortunately, we do have a number of schools that are unfunded, with a lot of their facilities as well, and that there has to be some kind of guidelines one way or the other as far as the procedures to go as the economy changes, because all these projects start 3, 4, 5, 6 years in conception before they actually get to reality of becoming a school, and things change. The economy changed, the makeup of the districts changed, all these different things going. But unfortunately, I think with the rules that we have today, I don't see, being creative, a way that we can approve the appeal. So unfortunately, I have to make a motion to accept staff's recommendation at this time.
Moved. Is there a second? Second. There's a second. Additional comments, Ms. Moore?
Well, this would be my last additional comment, and that would be that, as I said, the services are being provided, and they're being provided, they have to be provided in the classroom. If the district had simply written on their plans, classroom/library, we would be having a different discussion. And I think that it's tragic that we don't allow for a library for a small group of students that probably will not have one in the future unless we take a different action.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, maybe we can direct staff to maybe come up and see if there is possibilities for future situations like this where the districts have received savings and or change.
What alternative process may be available,
yeah,
so that people can have that flexibility in the process.
There may or may not be that option, but we'd at least look at it.
Recognizing
Perhaps,
that,
I mean, if we're
recognizing that would have an impact on those who are waiting online on the savings. Ms. Moore.
I would take that further to be talking about minimum essential facilities, and anybody that has left that out of a project. And minimum essential facilities are considered gymnasiums, libraries, and such, that whether that is appropriate use of savings for projects. So if we're going to look at the policy, I'd like to extend out to those types of facilities.
Okay. Additional comments from the public?
If I could only make one last comment, it does feel like the students will somewhat be penalized in our effort to be good stewards of the public's money in attempting to put forward a project and value engineer a project that is the best use of the dollars that we had. So I completely understand your difficulty, certainly the need to follow procedures. But I would just add, in this situation, it does feel that students will be penalized for our efforts to be good stewards.
Thank you. Ms. Farrar?
Actually, I had another. Since we had asked staff to bring us back some options and language, I would like the staff to also look at clarifying whether county offices of education, as it states in Article 16 of the California State Constitution, are able themselves with 55% vote of the voters to issue bonds for projects like this. I was surprised in questioning the staff about this to find that all projects of all county offices of education are deemed hardship, and that we pay 100% of the cost because somehow we have interpreted that they can't do bonds, although it states in the California Constitution that they can. I just think we ought to clarify that going forward, again, in the interest of being good stewards of the public money, giving people options, and making our money go further.
Thank you.
Ana Ferreira, County School Facilities Consortium. I think my presence here is timely. We have actually done some research in that area about bonds, and there is conflicting code section. It's not just the Constitution. There's statutory language also that says something that's different, and I'm happy to provide that to the board. We do believe that that is not the case. And on this issue, we would.
You think that state statute has overridden the Constitution?
I think they're
or vice
conflicting.
versa?
I think they're conflicting. And we've also had a legislative opinion request a couple years ago, so I'm happy to share that with you as well. And on this issue of clarification of the policy, we would certainly welcome that as well, given that LEAs would, they've given up their eligibility, and especially on this minimum essential facilities question, because if you've given up your eligibility and the grant amount, it's a local issue, you should be able to enhance your project if it's on, and in dealing with minimum, as I said, MEFs. I think that there's a question that really needs to be answered there, and we would be very concerned about a precedent for that for other counties. Thank you.
Senator Hancock, just so you know that I wholeheartedly agree with you 100% on the Constitution trumps any government code or education code. You folks right. So, no offense.
One last thing. I'm sorry. One last thing. It's up to 100%.
Right.
So.
Mr. Hagman.
Well, I was going to say, this whole, it leads to a bigger issue, too, of how we allocate the dollars. One, this project was approved without a library, even though it's minimum, facility you're supposed to have. Do we allow those type of projects to go in the future without the minimum facilities that should be there? Right. Secondly, on different pots of money, you have different rules as far as what you do the surplus. And any way we can encourage value engineering and saving the tax dollars of our bonds and to put the most spread out. But as we allocate it now, once we're done with the bond issuance, there's a lot of people on that list to go down that are not receiving any facilities whatsoever at this point. And so we need to kind of, one of these days, have maybe a strategic look at, for new construction, the price for labor and materials come down dramatically in the 2 or 3 year process. This goes down. What can we do with those savings? How do we encourage that value engineering, which I appreciate your district doing that. And I hate to penalize you when you do that. At the same time, we want that to happen, and maybe there's some way to incentivize that in the future construction projects. That would be the best benefit for the taxpayers as well. So I look forward to coming up with some creative ideas for that in the future.
Okay. My recollection is we have a motion that's been seconded. Any additional comments from the public?
Senator Lowenthal? No. Senator Hancock? Assemblymember Hagman? Scott Harvey? Kathleen Moore? Pedro Reyes?
Aye.
Does not carry.
We still have 2 members, so we still have 2 members still need to show up? So we'll leave it open.
Leave it open.
Leave it open for now. The alternative is the district is requesting an appeal, so we would then need a motion to provide for that in the absence of not carrying. And so we would need to get 6 votes for that. In the absence of that, we would need to table the item, just so people know kind of what the options where we are. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Tab 8 we've dispensed with. Tab 9 we've dispensed with. Tab 10, SISKIYOU County. 10-11 consent. Thank you. Tab 12, San Joaquin County Office of Education. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. My name is Rick Asbell. I'm a fiscal operations manager over at OPSC. The purpose of this report is to have the State Allocation Board levy the statutory material inaccuracy penalties for the San Joaquin County Office of Education. As a reminder, at the November 2010 board meeting, the board found that a material inaccuracy occurred for 8 of the district's projects. If you would please go to attachment B on page 193, we have a listing of those projects. And what you will find on that attachment is the listing of the projects, but if you look at the last 2 columns in the attachment, we show that there's 2 views or scenarios on how to calculate the interest associated with the material inaccuracy. The last column is associated with the County Office of Education interpretation. The second to last column is what the board has consistently applied when it has looked at the interest penalty. You'll see there's a wide variance between the two amounts. If you use the COE's approach, you're looking at approximately $1,400 in interest penalties, as opposed to the column next to it, which is $257,000. Now, once the board makes a finding of a material inaccuracy, statute requires the interest and loss of self-certification penalties be imposed. However, for this particular item, the board wished to discuss the interest penalty at a later date, so consider how the amount of interest is calculated. Concerning the interest penalty, consistent with law, regulation, and past board practice, the board has assessed the material inaccuracy penalty using the full amount of the premature fund release as the additional funding received. This is because at the time a district falsely certifies a fund release authorization, the district is not entitled to the fund releases of any funds. It's essentially a light switch. They either qualify or they don't. Using this established standard, the additional funding received for the 8 projects that were listed on the attachment was for $16 million, and the resulting interest penalty is $257,652. Now, kind of to go through the mechanics of how we calculate the interest, what we've done is we've highlighted one project in particular on stamp page 188, and that is the Kettleman Community School project. So looking at the timeline on page 188, the interest penalty that's calculated is at $39,418, and this is based on the April 25, 2003 warrant release of $2.3 million. The general obligation bond interest rate at the time the warrant was released was 4.28%, and the number of days between the warrant release and the date the county met its fund release certification is 146 days. If we look at the county office's position, the county contends that the additional funding received only amounts to the interest earned by the county in their own account, which in this case was $8,080, from the warrant release date, which is April 25, 2003, to the time when the County Office of Education met the requirements to have the funds released, which was on September 18, 2003. Using the county office's criteria, the additional funding received for all 8 projects equals $79,529, and the resulting interest penalty is $1,439. To illustrate this further, if you look on the table on page 189, we've broken out kind of a side-by-side comparison between what the board has done previously and what the county office's approach is. The base amount is considered to be the additional funding received. In this case, in the first, for the first example, it's $2.3 million. That is the warrant release. The county office's approach is the amount should be $8,080. There is no disagreement between what the daily interest rate is and the number of days are in calculating the interest. The result is we are advocating $39,418 as the interest penalty for this particular project. The county office's approach is that it be $138. If you take the county office's approach, you would basically reduce the amount owed for the interest by 96.5%. compared to what the board has done previously on other material inaccuracy projects. As far as the analysis of the legal opinion, at its November 2010 meeting, the board found that a material inaccuracy occurred as defined by the material inaccuracy statute because the certification was false at the time it was made. Previously, the board's actions, consistent with statute and regulation, considered the entire grant amount released to the school district to be the additional funding received. This material inaccuracy resulted in the county office receiving all the funds when it was ineligible to receive any funds. Assessing the penalty against the entire fund effectively restores the school facility program bonds to the condition that they were in, but for the false certification. If you would go to the bottom of page 189, we have laid out what staff's recommendations are. Staff's recommendations are to require the county to pay $257,652. The second recommendation is that a loss of self-certification based on the number of days that they were out of compliance for all 8 projects, that the loss of self-certification be for a period of 5 years until June 22, 2016. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Is there somebody from the district here?
Chairman Reyes, members of the board, I'm Amy Starr, the Director of Operations for the San Joaquin County Office of Education. I'd like to first present some context for this discussion. First of all, these fund releases occurred in 2002, 3, and 4, and times now and how money is apportioned is very different than what was going on in those years. And at that time, there were continuous apportionments. There was continuous funding. There was authority for bonds, and they were being continuously sold, so projects were being funded. So there was no unfunded list, and there really were not any line-jumping issues back then, because it was very different than it is now. Third, only a few people were really cognizant of the PMIB and how the flow of bond dollars went. It's not like now, where we all monitor that. And fourth, the legislation with a penalty concept and the material inaccuracies that came through SB 2066 in 2000 was new at the time that we took the fund releases. So it was a young program. There were not experiences in the concept of oversights becoming punishable as material inaccuracies. That's now coming forward because we are closing out projects. We're coming to the end of the process. And people who check the boxes, at least in our organization, and I would purport in others as well, they're very long gone. So those who ignored the fine print aren't there anymore. We don't argue that we did file the 5005 before the contracts were created, that thereby created an MI situation. We don't have an argument with a chart that sets forth a date and says, well, under the definition, you have a material inaccuracy. And we've said that previously. And we said that we would accept the 5 years non-certification, which is, in fact, very punitive and very embarrassing, if nothing else. It does come with a lot more paperwork for us and OPSC. And we are willing to accept that as punishment, so to speak. And we said that we would accept the requirement that we would pay $100 an hour to OPSC for all of the added paperwork review as part of that 5-year non-certification. And we do agree that the law does contemplate punitive treatments for material inaccuracies. And fifth, we did have our dollars early, and we are not entitled to the interest that we earned on those dollars during that time, nor are we entitled to, we need to pay that back plus the interest on that. Now, OPSC and we agree that the amount that we got was an approved apportionment, and therefore that money was set aside for us for 18 months. We could take it at any time. What we did was we said, well, we signed contracts when we had not really signed those contracts. But that $16+ million was set aside for us. It was ours. That leads us into our argument, which is, first of all, we do not believe that there is a statutory interest penalty. We do not believe that the statute says that. The law says that the penalty for the material inaccuracy is an amount proportionate to additional funding received. Our argument is that we did not receive any additional funding except for that amount which staff spoke to, that money earned while it was sitting in our coffers during that time period. And that the concept of an interest calculation is interest on the proportionate amount of additional funding. And that's what the statute says. And there's nothing in the code about the state recouping the interest. It doesn't say that. It just says that you pay interest on the amount that is the additional funding. And we believe that the law speaks to additional dollars and does not speak to premature fund releases. In other words, there's a list of things that are MIs, and the law says here's some punishment that you get for doing an MI, but it does not go back to every single MI and say, okay, this is the punishment that's to be applied. It's more of a blanket punishment. So in summary, we believe that the $257,000 is a penalty totally disproportionate to the transgression, and it is not contemplated by code. That is taking a concept of interest that the code does not state. And the code doesn't speak to every MI, as I pointed out. It speaks to a blanket punitive measure. And the deterrence to take money early just doesn't exist anymore. It's not there. And there was no intent to defraud or get money early at all back in 2002, 3, and 4. That's when our folks they did not read all of the boxes that they were checking. Now MIs are a part of the SFP lexicon, and so just that knowledge we believe is a sufficient deterrent. We're hardship, and all of the amount of money that we would have to pay is coming straight out of our general fund, and we have no bond, we have no other capital funds that we would apply. So it is general fund, it will come out of program for kids. And essentially what's happening is that we will be paying out of our general fund to allow another district to undertake some measure of construction, and we don't really believe that that's what the code contemplated, and we don't believe that that's what the board's intent is. So in summary, there were no additional funds that we got, and we believe that you can't create a conceptual pot of additional funding just to have something upon which to levy interest. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions of the board, and joining me is Mr. Bryce Chastain, who is district legal counsel, and we have been working with him in terms of the legal interpretation, and he is prepared to try to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Either staff or both of you could answer this. At the time that you received the funds, you say there's no additional funds received. My interpretation is you weren't qualified to receive any funds because you didn't meet the criteria at that time. And that's the way I believe it's been interpreted in the past as well. And so the entire money would not be, if you actually had it, were looking at the boxes and verified at that fact at that time, would you or would you not receive any funds at that time?
If I may, I think the conflict is in the statute talking about an amount proportionate to the additional funding received, and I understand the argument that you weren't entitled to receive it when you did. But the apportionment had been made. It was an amount of money that had been set aside for the county office. And it was just it was a matter of meeting technical requirements for when they got it. So when the statute is talking about additional funds, in a legal sense, when you're reading the statute and how it gets interpreted into the regulation, if there's nothing else in the statute that tells you what is meant by additional funds, you literally go to the dictionary. And so it's funds in addition to what they were supposed to be getting. Well, they were always supposed to get the money that they got. They just got it early.
But at that time, when you said, we're ready to go, we got all our boxes checked, we're ready to go get funded, and in fact, the county or the district was not qualified to receive any funds at that point if the thing was filled out accurately at that point. And I understand the context was different. Maybe there was no one waiting in line at that time, but the purpose for the regs were to get the money out to shovel-ready projects, get it out there as quickly as you can, get those jobs going, get the stuff gone. So, and I believe in the past, and I'd love to have our council chirp in, there's been other cases of this that they have followed that little interpretation of either you're qualified or you're not qualified at that point in time, and so therefore everything in addition to that was an overpayment or at that particular time. Doesn't mean you wouldn't qualify 6 months later or 3 months later or whatever, but that particular time, those funds are extra outside. And one of the things I'm afraid of, if you, again, like our last discussion, if you change policies, interpretations of the law in midstream about doing it statutorily or the proper way, then it may open up a number of cases that have already been reviewed under the same interpretation of those codes, almost like case law. And my interpretation of it is either qualify or you don't qualify at that time when you got the funds. You made assessment that you were, and I understand that previous administrations and the people at this time are not at fault, that you're paying for previous sins. But but at the time that weren't qualified, that money could have gone to another project at that time, and maybe there was a waiting line, maybe there wasn't, but that school district was not ready to go at that time. I'm looking for guidance. Is that my interpretation correct, or?
That was consistent with how the board has interpreted the material inaccuracy penalty. And the chart on 188 where it shows the timeline. On 4/25/03, the warrant is released. At that time, the certification was that the school had their contracts in place, and that was based on that the warrant is released. But at that time, they didn't have them. If they had certified correctly, they wouldn't have gotten $0. So the additional dollars they received, but for the material inaccuracy, was the entire warrant.
And I guess the follow-up on that, and that's been how many cases in the past have this been interpreted in that legal way?
I believe we've had 6 different districts, but about 39.
I believe it's 39, yes.
Projects, which it was interpreted consistently in that way. And just to give you a little bit of my understanding, we talk about premature and early fund release because we're looking at it years later, the project's done, and we discover these issues after the project's done. But had it been possible for staff to jump in the middle, and so in this case, the warrant release was in April 25th. If staff were to come in May 25th or June 25th and be able to audit at that time, see the construction contracts weren't in place, they would have been entitled to no money. So we only call it premature or early because we know in hindsight that the contracts were finally made and the project was finally completed.
And the purpose, the intent of the penalty were to, again, with limited resources going out to X amount of districts or projects that are available at the time, were to try to put the most priority, the most shovel-ready, how do you say it, the most ready districts in the front of the line to receive the bond funds. And as I understand, the bonds were sold as needed in that time period. So would the state of California, if the projects weren't ready, issue more bond funds at that time if the projects weren't ready?
Well, the concept being that the funds are staying with us until your project is ready. Other districts may be coming in and they're ready to start building their schools. They access the funds as they're ready to go. In this case, if we took away the disincentive to come in for these funds without having the requisite contracts, they're holding up dollars while there's no contracts going, there's no construction going on yet. Doesn't look like it's going to be coming up right away. Other districts are ready to go. They don't get to those dollars.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, I have sympathy with all districts sometimes when you have to deal with decisions that were made prior to when a superintendent or school board member came on board. But when I was elected, there were decisions that were made that I owned, There were decisions, whether they were contract negotiations or decisions to sue or not to sue or to build a school a certain way, and I own them. You can't go back and say, well, it's not my fault. I would have done it differently. And in this situation, to me, it's really pretty simple. I just do not understand why when people sign a statement that says you're under contract and ask for funding, they don't understand what that statement is, particularly people who are in education, who are teaching people, to read. You sign a statement that says you're under contract and you're not under contract, and it's that simple. And when you sell bonds, just like when a school district goes out and sells general obligation bonds, when we sell those bonds, it's a pact that we make with the public, and there are requirements, if they're local bonds, that you have to have so much under construction with a certain period of time, and a number of other requirements to even maintain the tax deductibility of those bonds. I mean, districts know that. Now, in this case, it's state money. It's not your local general obligation bonds. But when the voters of California approve those bonds, they're expecting us to give the money to districts to build schools. And that's why we have some of those requirements. They're not expecting us to give the money to districts to bank it, to earn interest arbitrage, even though that may have not have been your intent. But that's, in effect, what happened here. And we can talk about interest rates, but if you had been funded when you were under contract, okay, and the state had kept that money in the pooled money investment account, the state would have earned another $257,000 in interest. And what the state would have done with that money is given it to another school to build a classroom or a career tech or do something else with their schools. So we lost the ability to take that interest that we earned and give it out to another project and help another school. And when I read the regulations, and you're saying they're not clear, it says, pursuant to a repayment schedule approved by the board of no more than 5 years, the school district shall repay to the board for deposit, and I'll go on and on, as the case may be, an amount proportionate to the additional funding received as a result of material inaccuracy. The additional money you had, I mean, you could say it was the whole amount, but we're charging you the interest on it. And it said, including interest at the rate paid on monies in the pooled money investment account or at the highest rate of interest for the most recent issue of state general obligation bonds as established pursuant to Chapter 4. That's pretty clear to me that the interest rate that is assessed is what the state would have earned on the money. And so while I have sympathy for you, I think it's clear, it's consistent with what we've done before, and I'm inclined to support the staff recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes.
We also agree that the statute is clear, but we don't necessarily agree with the interpretation. There was the $16.4 million that we were allowed to get, and shovel-ready wasn't a concept then, but the concept of getting money out there to build schools was certainly there. That's why there was an 18-month requirement and so forth.
You signed a statement that said you were under contract.
I fully stipulate that we were bad, and we did sign a statement that was incorrect. Where we start to part company is in what should actually be the computation for the penalty, and we agree with that part of the statute that says proportionate to the additional funding received. And we're saying we got it early, but we got no additional funding, except we are saying we did earn some money when that was sitting in our account, when we weren't actually paying contractors. And that is the additional money, and we have to pay that back to you. And we have to pay you interest computed upon that by the formula that's in the code. We feel that the code does not say that there was additional funding over here. The fact that we got it early was not additional, and we didn't really reap any benefit from having that money. And whether somebody else was disenfranchised or not, we don't believe that they were at that time. Now, that would be the case.
You know what, you can't say that, I don't think you can interpret statutes to say that, well, if you have more school districts asking for money that need it, it's okay. It's not okay. If you have less, it is okay, or whatever. It's really clear. You signed a statement that said you were under contract. You weren't. You got, because of that, you got the money early. You were able to basically bank that money, and
we're going to get back.
And what I would say is that money, that the additional amount you received was that amount of money for the time period that you didn't use it because you were entitled to zero. And to me, the statute, and good people can agree to disagree, the statute is really clear that the interest is at the pool, I read it, is at the pooled money investment account or the interest rate you would have received on the bond. And it's not at the interest rate you received. If that were the case, if we were to interpret the way you're talking about, I could take money from the state, put it in a zero interest earning account to make sure I got my share, leave it there for a year or as long as I want, and then use the money when I was ready. And that's not the intent. The intent is to get money to programs. So, again, we can agree to disagree, but I truly believe the amount you were overfunded was the full amount. You may have eventually spent it, but was that full amount for the time period where you shouldn't have had the money. You shouldn't have had the money until you were under contract. And that's the statement that you signed.
Counsel, you sound like you want to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Again, just to be clear, we're not differing over the fact of the violation, just what the penalty is going to be. And I think what we would like to focus on is when we're talking about amount proportionate, we're talking about something that really is going to deter the behavior. What's going to get it back? As Mr. Davis brought up, and as you are implying, there's an issue as to when this issue is brought up in time. Is it 2 months after the money is received but before any contracts are signed? Is it, does some entity take it, stick it in a bank account for zero interest just to be sure that they're going to get the money and sit on it, and then maybe never spend it? In either of those cases, there is a more appropriate penalty. If they haven't spent the money could be taken back. If they put it in a bank account and they actually have no use for it and they're just trying to hold it, the money can be taken back. The more common motivation one would suspect, if there is a motive, as opposed to just error, instead of just checking the boxes, as some people will just do. They're checking the boxes because they think they need the money right away. The only motivation is to put it in a bank account and try and make money. So that is the additional funding then that you get. And so the approach that we're proposing as being more consistent with the term additional funding achieves all of these aims. It deters the behavior in context with every other penalty that's available. You know, another issue that we should address is, this money was drawn out in a period of time when the allocation had been made. It was a funded allocation. That money was set aside. It wasn't money that was going to be made available to anybody else during that same time period. This is not an issue of another district going without the money because it was drawn out early. That money was sitting there for a period of several more months anyway until the county office drew it out. So nothing that we are proposing would encourage or excuse or fail to penalize the bad behavior. It would not penalize other innocent parties.
Do you disagree that if the state had that money in the bank, if it had funded it at the time it legally should have been funded, the state would have earned another $257,000 and been able to allocate that money out to another district's project?
I don't disagree that that interest would have been earned. The problem is that the statute doesn't say that you can take back an amount of interest on the full interest on that early amount. It's an amount proportional to the additional funding and then interest on that.
Maybe that's where we disagree, because as I read it, it's clear.
Can I ask a clarifying question? The $257,000 gets paid back regardless, correct? Or am I?
No, that's what the bill said.
The 257 is a computation, and I believe staff has done a good job laying out the numbers and the background to it, but it's really a computation. What we're saying is, I don't argue at all with the statute saying you pay at this rate or you pay at this rate. The issue is not the rate. It's what do you apply the rate to? And we're saying the statute says to a proportionate amount of additional funding received, and we're saying, well, yeah, we got it early. We're not arguing that, but that the computation of the penalty is not consistent with the statute, because it doesn't say the state recoups lost interest during this time period when you weren't supposed to have the money because you hadn't signed your contracts yet.
Mr. Harvey?
Just for the record, I got to agree with Assemblymember Buchanan. I think not only is the statute clear to me, but to do what you're asking us to do would violate what we have done for other projects, and I am concerned about what that change in policy might do to our prior actions. So for that reason, also, I am supportive of staff's recommendation. And if I can, Ms. Moore, to show the fact that the 257 is not paid back, if you take a look at page 193, the last column on that bar graph is what would be returned to the state if we accept this applicant's appeal. It would be $1,439, and I think we have evidence that says they really should be paying back $257,652.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we would actually be paying the $70,000+, and this is the amount of interest on that. So we would be repaying what's been sitting in our bank and then the interest on that.
Okay, I have Mr. Hagman and I have Senator Lowenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to take the concept, just logic further, if you had a $20 million project that you wanted to get out and the school district says we're ready to fund, ready to build, but they don't build for a year, that's interest that either we're paying on our bonds that we issued or interest that we're not received in the account for that year. Same type of logic here. Not that there's malintent in this whatsoever, but just to to take your scenario and apply it in a more abstruse way or bigger thing, you can see how much that logic does not continue on with other projects. Is we're trying to sell as minimal bonds as needed at the time to get it out as fast as we can, so we're not paying interest on it to the people who buy our bonds, as well as if we don't expend all the money right away, we stick an account to try to offset the interest the taxpayers are paying on those funds. So if you didn't have some kind of rules and regulations to say we're going to pull out this account that we're receiving interest on because you need it right now to spend it, and this is not 90 days or 3 months like your period, but they happen to be a year period, and you were not receiving any interest on that or not much, the state or the taxpayers be upside down even a greater distance. And I think that's what the intent was for these statutes. That's what, if it's clear or not clear, I think most of us on the board believe it's fairly clear on the language, and it's been applied several times to other cases in the past. But just the logical part, even if there wasn't other people waiting in line, it's either sitting in an account earning interest to offset that what the interest we're paying on those bonds, or it's being utilized, and that's why they have the time periods in there. And we can have some more discussion on it, Mr. Chair, but I'll make a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Been moved in second. Senator Lowenthal.
Stand on attachment B on page 193, the fund release authorization, and the percentage of construction under contract. So between, and it looks to me as between August of 2002, fund releases were given through April of 2004, and that the percentage, and that's almost 2 years, and that the percentage of construction under contract was either 1% or 0%. Is that not true?
Yes. At the time that they signed the fund release, we were able to go back in audits and verify.
And there was 0
That's what they had
or
under.
1%.
Yeah. Right. And remember
so this argument, it might have that you make, and I tend to agree with Assemblymember Buchanan. And I mean, if there had been an oversight, if it was at 45%, or that things they knew that's what the rules were, but when there was either nothing under construction under contract or 1%, and it lasted over 2 years, and you kept doing that time after time after time. We're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times you said that you had 50% under construction, under contract, and you had 1% or 0%. Makes it appear to me that this was not just an oversight or not understanding the law, as you pointed out, which you said occurred in 2000. We're now at 2004, and you're still doing that 4 years later. Makes it much more difficult for me to listen to your appeal.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Sorry about the 257,000. I knew that there was an interest amount. So the 79,000 in interest that the county earned, the penalty is in addition to that. So so they'll pay back the 79,000 that they earned, or
no,
not?
it would be just the 257.
That's the double dip question. So they earned 79,000.
There is no double dip question here or issue. I think you're going toward talking about financial hardship savings and the recoupment of that. That's under a regulation 1859-103. What's happening with the material inaccuracy and the interest penalty is statute. It's 170.51.
So what happens to the 79,000 of interest?
That's not the issue. Yes.
So if theoretically they had it, they could use it towards the 257,000 penalty.
Yeah.
Okay, the issue's been moved and seconded. Is there any additional comments from the public?
With the evaluation of the actual interest rate, because again the statute discusses using the PMIB rate, and in September of when the funds were drawn down, the rate actually was Not the same as the general obligation bond interest rate, which is what's being used here in this column, but the PMIB rate was actually in that month 0.651%.
But
it's the higher of the
It's
two.
the higher of the two. It's the general obligation bond rate.
Our understanding is actually, if you look at the statute, it talks about the date of
Would you identify
filing.
yourself for the record,
I
please?
apologize. I'm Terry Tao. I'm one of the attorneys with Mr. Chastain's firm. When you look at the actual statute that's being applied, it actually talks about the interest rate based on the date of the finding of material inaccuracy, which, as I understand it, was sometime in 2010. Am I not mistaken? And the 2010 interest rate is 0.6, not 4.
I think it applies to the, go ahead, staff.
At the time that the warrant release date, that's what we're looking at.
The statute right here says from the date the board made the finding of material inaccuracy, not the date of release.
Is that additional interest on the money owed, or is that on the penalty? Counselors, staff?
The rate of interest is stated in statute under Section B, and also talks about when the funds were released. So that's the way we've been statutorily assessing the interest when the funds were released. And it's either based on the higher of the two rates.
Where is this?
And that's basically been the board's interpretation.
Yes. And I think you complimented the staff on their calculation at the beginning of the presentation. I find it interesting. Thank you. I am paying attention even though I'm doing a bunch of other stuff. Okay, please call the roll.
Senator Lowenthal.
And can you, the motion is to?
Staff recommendation.
Aye.
Senator Hancock. Assemblymember Brownlee. Assemblymember Buchanan. Assemblymember Hagman. Scott Harvey. Kathleen Moore. Pedro Reyes.
Aye.
Carries.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time. I know that we disagree, but I appreciate the board's time looking at this, and it's not an easy, it's kind of a morass, the whole MI.
Yeah, I had dark hair when I started reading it.
Yeah, me too.
Sue, would you please go back on those items where we need to add? Thank you.
This is for tab 7 Butte COE to approve staff recommendation. Assemblymember Brownlee. Yeah.
To deny?
It approves staff recommendation, which is to deny the district's request.
No. Okay.
Assemblymember Buchanan. Doesn't carry.
Does not carry. Okay, so is there a substitute motion to approve Butte's request of approval? I don't think we have the votes to do that unless somebody wants to change their vote. So for now, we will table this one. Okay?
Could we ask that they take, staff in the district take another, or the County Office of Education, take another look at this? If there's any possible way that we can achieve the objective of the services are provided in the classroom, can we possibly extend the classroom to provide a better service of a library?
Well, the problem is within the existing regulations and code, we can't. That's kind of the wall we have in front of us. And so we could, philosophically disagree as to whether or not schools should be included. Libraries should be included. There is a process of providing resources or apportioning resources, and that process was adhered to. And so we're asking, if we were to do that as a board, we're asking folks to look for ways of circumventing that. Unless we go forward and amend the statute or the regulations, that is the wall, the hands that tied us to begin with. Senator?
Yeah, except, as I understand the problem, maybe we have to do that, is that they came to the Department of Education wanting a library, conceptually. The department said, you don't have the money to do this. They then went out, and so they did it, even though they know they needed to have a library. They said they'd use those library services in a classroom because they didn't have the money. They then did value added, and they ended up having the money, and now we're saying you can't build a library. That's the, and I understand that they were the that's right.
But my understanding is that when you approve these hardship grants, you're approving them for a specific purpose. So if they want to, they should be coming back to us, because I think it's a very bad precedent to say no with a new application and not to change the existing application.
I appreciate
and I understand that in my school district, and we've never had any finance through facilities or financial hardships. We had plenty of schools that had libraries and classrooms because of facility limitations. And I'm not saying it's ideal or anything else, but I think the proper way to handle it is to fill out a new application and come back. And because if not, you're setting a precedent going forward for other school districts.
Then they don't get the money because we are running out of money, and they go to the back of the line.
Well, are you going to let every school district who runs under in a hardship situation like this decide that they want to spend money in different ways?
Well, here I'm just saying that there was.
Well, I answered that yes, and how I would answer it yes is if there was the situation that there wasn't a library, there wasn't an office, there wasn't a gym, there wasn't an essential facility that they left out because they thought that they could not afford it. Would I want to spend the savings on that if we're asking the direct question? I would say yes. And I would say maybe we should relook at the policy that we say savings can only go towards certain things. And if the board would entertain that discussion about how do we handle savings for financial hardship projects, I'd love to revisit it.
And I think changing the policy moving forward and everybody being aware of the rules of the game is something worthwhile, some worthwhile conversation that we can have. But to apply wouldn't it be nice if we to do it retrospectively, I'm not sure that really.
Are there? I'm sorry I missed the discussion, but are there past cases that fall exactly like this? I don't think that there is.
And my understanding is
taking advantage, I think, doing everything that right. They didn't do anything wrong, but market conditions changed dramatically, and now they have the ability to do what they originally wanted to do, which was to build the library.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure that there's, as we talked about the other issue, there are other cases of which we have interpreted the regulations. I'm just not sure there's a back history on this one.
Have we ever taken a district that's had money left over in a financial hardship situation and said, keep it and use it up for something else?
we did, and there's was it Victor Valley or something Valley? We used it to change the scope of a gym, but not to add, and we sort of had that conversation.
Okay, so the
as well.
gym was already in it because
the gym was there and it was made bigger or expanded, as opposed to a brand
Under minimum essential facilities.
I believe Victor Valley was not a hardship.
It was not a hardship. Well,
never done it in financial because I think, maybe
It is in the item that went before the board, it says financial hardship, yes. The one that I have.
Victor Valley or Victor Valley?
The item that I have in my book.
While you're finding it.
No, I have a copy of an item for Victor Valley that says financial hardship, yes. So if I have a wrong copy.
I apologize, I don't have an item. So.
But the issue there was it was a gymnasium that was part of the project, and we simply made the scope amendment to facilitate something that was part of the project. This was adding after the fact, and I think we were all sympathetic. I wish you could have been here for the full discussion, because I don't want to relive it now. As a point of order, we're going to have to carry this over, but we were all sympathetic to having a more complete school, but the way in which the current regulations read, we could not do it, and it maybe begs the question for revisiting that question going forward.
And I guess that's where I am. when you do financial hardship program, the way I interpret it is that someone's coming to you and saying, we need to replace these roofs, we need to build these classrooms, whatever, and we've tried to pass bonds, we can't pass them, we have health and safety issues, and we need to replace them, so can you please help us out and pay for those projects, right? And we're paying 100% of it. And I see us as funding specific projects, not as writing a check to the district to, do what it can. Now, if you're in a normal 50-50 match situation or what else, if you happen to save money, then you have the ability. But this is where we're funding a project. And so I think if we're going to change the policy, and maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't, but then let's have that discussion. But if we're going to apply the policy in the same way we have, then they really should be coming back to us and asking for another financial hardship grant, I think, to add whatever the library, whatever facilities that they need. And that's just.
You make a good point.
Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to, because that item failed. So it was tabled. So let's move on to Muroc.
Just, Mr. Chair, a point of order on that, too.
Yes.
Basically, there was a motion, I forgot what the motion were, but I'm just wondering, does it really get tabled, or there was an appeal made, appeal was not granted, so does it get tabled, or just it's off calendar at this point? So it's not really a positive to approve a negative here. It is basically you need a motion to approve the appeal. If not, the appeal is denied. It doesn't get retaken up again just because there's a lack of votes for the alternative motion, I guess. The approve either has to be positively accepted or by default it's denied. Just like passing a bill in legislature, if you don't have the votes to pass the bill, it dies.
You're right. So the actual request here is that the district has sought an appeal. That's your position. That the district is seeking an appeal, and the staff's recommendation is not to provide the appeal. So really, the motion therefore has to be to approve the appeal. Was that what you're
correct?
But I'm
just saying the motion I made probably was
inappropriate.
Basically, it needs enough votes, just like you're trying to move a bill out of committee, to pass. Otherwise, by default, it fails. And I think, as this as a point of order, otherwise you may have things all the time just hanging out here. It's either on or off.
So looking at the issue on page 102.
We voted for this, just to understand, we voted for the staff recommendation, which we always do.
Right.
We did not have sufficient votes for it. That's all I know.
Yeah, so I think I think basically we missed what we should have done is see if there's a motion to approve the district's appeal, and if that passes, then the appeal is granted. If it does not pass, then I think the appeal is not granted at that point. This doesn't linger.
So just to understand, the default is really deny the request, which has been made. So really the motion before the board is really to provide Butte with the appeal and not really the staff's recommendation.
Correct. And I think that's just, as a point of order, that's the way it should have been handled in the first place. And just like, for example, and again, I have only this to relate to, either on a council meeting or a school board meeting or the legislature, you need positive votes to make an action happen. If someone lays off a vote, that's equivalent to no, because you don't have that positive vote to make something happen. In this case, a positive vote needs to happen in order to accept the appeal. Otherwise, the process of denial is automatic. The process administratively has been to deny the district that request. They're asking for a positive process, an appeal to override the staff's recommendation. If that positive appeal does not be voted out of this board, then basically the appeal is denied, and the normal process goes forward. So I think
is to deny the district's request.
Right.
So if we don't pass it, then it's not denied.
Right.
Well, there is no default. There's no default.
The description is Butte County requests approval to change the scope. That's the issue before us, right? Butte County's coming in asking for approval.
Yeah, it's not like the district's going to do it unless we override it. I mean, the board's going to do
Well, the staff's recommendation is to deny the district.
deny the request.
Why don't I move that the appeal be granted, and we see what happens.
Okay.
Well, I think, can we ask our attorney?
Attorney, counsel?
Is this all legal, what we're doing?
We haven't adjourned this meeting. This is an interesting area, and I somewhat defer to some of the experience of members of the board who've sat on other bodies in their methodology on voting. I would say that another motion is necessary, that we had a motion fail.
Right. So now we have but does the motion fail? What is the significance of it? Since it seems to me,
or the motion didn't pass.
Failed to
Right.
deny
Right.
the district's request.
Right.
I thought the
So
roll was held
therefore,
open.
it's not denied because it failed.
Actually, it was left open. It was left open until the assembly members came, and then the motion failed. But here's the issue, though. I think Mr. Hagman has a point in that the staff recommendation to deny it's not appropriate, because what it is really the question before it is the county's appeal of the issue. No, I think.
In this issue, the reason this is on the agenda is because the district had filed an appeal objecting to staff's conclusions, and that's that. So they are it's you could call them the moving party on this. They have moved forward for this judgment by this board.
Basically, Mr. Chair, if we don't take action to overturn staff recommendations, then the staff recommendations stay in place.
Right.
So we need, if it stays on the table, basically the thing dies, in my interpretation, because the staff has denied the request. There was an appeal process made. The only way that the denial stays in place is if the board takes action to reverse the staff's recommendation, because that's the process in place.
But the recommendation was they hadn't already denied it.
Yeah, they have denied it, and there was an appeal made.
It's the appeal, but it still says the recommendation is to deny. That's in the present, the district's request.
Yeah.
Okay.
In which if you don't adopt the district's request, it is denied.
Okay, so we now have a substitute motion to approve the district's request. Is there a second?
To approve the appeal.
To approve the appeal.
Now we're voting aye, an aye vote is yes.
To approve the appeal. So I have a motion to approve the appeal. Is there a second? Okay, so it's been moved in second to approve the county's appeal.
I want to get
Yeah.
words from our lawyer that what we're doing is correct.
We have not adjourned, so any one of these items can be taken up again.
I believe we're in the right. The original motion did not pass. We are looking at a different motion.
Right. So this is a different motion. So the motion now is to approve Butte County's appeal. Okay?
Senator Lowenthal?
Aye.
Senator Hancock? No. Assemblymember Brownlee?
Aye.
Assemblymember Buchanan?
No.
Assemblymember Hagman?
No.
Scott Harvey?
No.
Kathleen Moore?
Aye.
Pedro Reyes?
Aye. No. No.
It doesn't.
No.
It does not carry.
No.
3 noes make an aye.
And I was paying attention to the ayes and noes and counting.
So if a motion fails,
The motion
then-
fails.
and the appeal is denied at this point, it's not tabled, it's not put over, it's basically the appeal's been denied because they did not carry enough positive votes to make the appeal.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, am I now the parliamentarian here? or
Yes,
what?
thank you, sir. That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Using Hagman's rules of order, is that it?
Item 10 and item 11 are consent. Would you go back on the minutes and the consent, the original consent, please?
Yeah, let's go.
Not yet.
We have anything more?
Yes.
All right, so we could start with the minutes.
The minutes?
And let's see, Assemblymember Brownlee. Assemblymember Buchanan. Carries. And next was the consent calendar, adding tabs 10 and tab 11 to the consent calendar. Assemblymember Brownlee. Assemblymember Buchanan. Carries.
Okay. Thank you. No, do we need 13, Muirk? We're on tab 13? Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
There we go. So if you go to page 194 behind tab 13, this is to present school facility program review findings, to request the State Allocation Board find that a material inaccuracy has occurred, which resulted in a funding advantage for the Muroc Joint Unified School District. Also to request to levy the appropriate interest penalty as provided in law. During an expenditure review of the Desert Junior Senior High School project, it was discovered that the district falsely certified on its fund release. If you would go to page 202, the district signed their certification on January 14, 2003. At that time, it had 0% under contract. It did not reach compliance until 272 days later. Based on previous board actions and practice, we calculate the interest at $76,278. Now, the district's position behind this is they don't dispute the premature fund release occurred, but contends the error was made by a prior administration and was not done maliciously. Because the premature fund release was isolated and unintentional, the district does not believe it should lose its self-certification privileges. The district believes charging the interest penalty and taking away the self-certification privileges for an isolated mistake would be unduly harsh. Our response to that is it's not our intent to unduly penalize any one particular district. Rather, the goal is to treat all districts as fairly as possible. The recommendations in this item are consistent with material inaccuracy law, regulation, and past board actions. Although the error was made by a prior administration and may be unintentional, it resulted in an early fund release, giving the district a funding advantage over other districts. If you would look at the bottom of page 197, our recommendations are as follows. Find that a material inaccuracy occurred for the project, which resulted in early fund release. Require the district to repay $76,278. And then, based on the methodology on page 201, recommend that a loss of self-certification for the project be for a period of 4 years until June 22, 2015. There is one other item of note. With the penalty of $76,278, if that is levied, the district is requesting that a 5-year repayment plan be put into place.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Any questions from the board? Comments from the public? It's moved and seconded. Thank you, sir. Go ahead. Make your comments.
My name is Byron Johnson. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations for the Muroc School District. And thank you for having me come. I was delayed in January, but we're here now. I do not dispute the inaccuracy in 03. And it was, as it was stated in the letter, it was not maliciously done. We had a firm that was our consultant, since we are a small school district, that did all of our paperwork. And we signed the checked box that said we were under 50% contract, and we were not. What I do dispute right now is the finding of $76,000 and some change. That's my lingo for some few dollars there. In 1966, up until that time, the state ran on a cash basis accounting system. In 66, it was changed to an accrual accounting system. Then it changed back in 1973 back to the cash basis accounting. And then in 1991, it was changed back to the accrual accounting system, and which we now operate. The thing is, our interest was levied from January 14th of 2003 under the accrual accounting system. That's when our penalty started. Our bank runs on a cash basis accounting system. So we did not start earning interest until January the 25th of 2003, which is 11 days. It might not seem a lot. It's only a little over $3,000. But $3,000 to us is a great deal of money. So I'm asking that because of the two types of accounting systems that are being held, one is at the state, one's at our banks, that the difference be made up to where it is not 272 days, but we reduce that by 11 days to make it 261 days. And thank you.
Staff, you want to comment on that?
Well, the way that we calculated the interest is what we've done with board practice in the past.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved in second. Any additional comments from the public?
If I have a question then. If that is the case, we're not earning any interest because the state is still earning the interest because the check was not deposited in our bank for 11 days. It was written, the warrant was written on the 19th. It didn't get to us until the 25th. So why are we paying interest when we were not drawing any interest? That's my concern.
Mr. Chair.
I mean, that close to it. Just so we get on the right track as far as the motions, instead of approving the staff recommendations, we probably should entertain a motion to approve the applicant's appeal.
Deny the appeal.
Well, that would be the positive action again. It should be, the staff goes on its course. If there's an appeal, you have to have something to affirm the appeal. Otherwise, by operation, it would die. So instead of the second reverse like we did the first time, this saying for future.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This is not an appeal.
This is not an appeal.
Right.
This is not an appeal. So, do I have a motion?
A motion to approve the staff recommendation.
It's been moved and second. Call the vote.
Senator Lowenthal.
Aye.
Senator Hancock. Assemblymember Brownlee. Assemblymember Buchanan. Assemblymember Hagman. Scott Harvey. Kathleen Moore. Pedro Reyes.
Aye.
Carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
Thank you. Item 14 has been postponed. Item 15 we've put over. Item 16, seismic retrofit. Senator Hack?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would make a motion that we adopt the staff recommendations. Number one, adopt the proposed amendments to the regulations on the attachment and begin the regulatory process. And number two, authorize the acting executive officer to file these regulations with the OAL on an emergency basis.
Okay. So the recommendations are on page 221. Ms. Moore.
I just have a comment. Obviously was in part of the subcommittee, and we were in agreement on everything with one exception, and that was that the regulations state for any application for the seismic mitigation of the most vulnerable Category 2 buildings not apportioned or approved for placement on the unfunded list pursuant to this section, the application shall be returned to the applicant. We were not in consensus on that item before. I think we were 2-1 on that piece, and I was the one that did not support it, and I just want to give the reasons to the board, and then we can take the action however we would like. For the programs of modernization and new construction, as a board, we have not taken the action yet concerning a future unfunded list. We said when we reach that point, we will make that decision. Is that correct, staff?
That is correct. Sorry.
So the reason that I didn't support it here is I believe that we should wait to make that decision when that occurs. Otherwise, we're making the decision now on this program when we are leaving that decision to a future time on other programs. And that was my reasoning for not supporting it.
If I may just briefly to offer the rebuttal, the reason we kept the recommendation in place is that it is consistent with two other actions and discussions by the board. Most recently, in August 2009, the board determined it did not want to create an unfunded list for this program. So we have a policy in place, and to respect what the board had done before, we kept it, kept the language as proposed in this item.
Okay. Any comments, Ms. Senator?
Actually, I did want to add another recommendation, and that is that we get a report back from staff, and I'm trying to think what would be an appropriate time. Do we meet in September and October?
We meet monthly.
So
there's only two months that we don't meet, right? December, 1 month that we don't meet.
We have a
well,
September.
I want one soon, and I'm trying to figure out
September 28th.
whether October, November, or whether we should wait till January, and I'm actually open to consultation with staff on this. The purpose of getting these regulations was to get that money out and on the street and doing the work. And so we tried to clarify, broaden the range of projects that could be considered. And, you know, we have $194 million waiting to create jobs and make kids safe in schools. What would you suggest, Ms. Silverman?
Well, I think if regulations move through tonight, obviously we'd somewhere in the window, if we file it on an emergency basis, it could be in effect potentially within 90 days. So I think reporting back to January on the activity of projects coming through, you know, Division State Architect or even filing for funding for the State Allocation Board, we can certainly provide an update in January.
Okay.
Can we add that? I would like to have an update on this because the pot of money is so small relative to what we have, to actually have you incorporate into your executive report on a monthly basis once the money starts going out. So we know what's out there.
We can certainly do that.
Yeah, that'd be great. If you can do it as one of your lines of what's going on this, I think that'd be helpful for us to know whether or not we're moving in the right direction and we're getting the money out.
I think that would be terrific because you're right. The pot of money is small, and the sort of off-putting factor is that so little of it has been spent in such a long time, and we would hope that these new regulations would result in a rapid
And if we're not seeing movement of those funds out, we can then consider moving the regulations someplace else and act faster than what we've done in the past 2 years.
Right, so thank you.
Would that be
we'll
okay?
put that into the motion.
We can do that? Okay. Okay.
Just a clarification on the motion, it's not including creating an unfunded list, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Okay. Comments from the public?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Lyle Smoot, representing Los Angeles Unified School District. I have a specific request related to the regulation draft. If you look at page 223, category E there, it says if an application cannot be fully apportioned or approved for placement on the unfunded list because insufficient funding is available. Now, I assume when you're talking about insufficient funding, you're talking about bond authority, not a bond sale. Is that correct?
Well, in the seismic, you only have 194, so.
Well, but if you sell $100 million.
It's bond authority. It's bond authority.
Okay, bond authority. I would ask that you remove the approved for placement on the unfunded list. Let me explain why. Let's say you're down to the last $3 million. You've got projects on the unfunded list down to the last $3 million. The next project that comes in is for $5 million. Okay, the only way you can go on the unfunded list is if you reduce your request to $3 million. But now you go on down the line, and when you actually start making apportionments, it turns out there's $5 million available. That project is now going to get shorted $2 million simply because of the process, not because of the rationale behind it. If you just remove that, the district comes in with the last project. There's no unfunded list. I understand that, or at least not at this point in time. But a district that has to reduce their request to get on the unfunded list then is out of line for the other $2 million, even if it becomes available when you're making apportionments. That doesn't make sense. Last piece of this is, of course, then it says you may either, at some point in time, you can either reduce your request for the remaining funding. I would ask that you say that we change that to accept a reduced funding instead of having to reduce the request. But then it says if funding is reduced, the board shall consider funding the next project eligible for funding. Without an unfunded list, there is no next project. So it doesn't make sense to limit that last project before you know the answer, how much money you actually have available for apportionment, to say nothing of the fact that you're going to make an apportionment at some point, and you might have savings that come in later that project should have gotten. So I think if you just change that, delete those words talking about approved for a placement on the unfunded list, just delete that. It has no relevance, no meaning here. You can accept a smaller apportionment when you actually know what the amount of money is available, if that's the right thing to do at that time.
If I may, I wish I could recall our complete committee discussion. If staff can help me, Mr. Smoot, you raised this at the committee, and for whatever reason we did not change it at committee. If you can help me remember why we determined that this version of the staff draft was accurate and sufficient under the circumstances, I'd appreciate it.
And just looking at this right now, it seems like if you remove that, approve the for placement on the unfunded list, the board could approve projects beyond the bonding authority on the unfunded list. So you could have over the $194 million on the unfunded list, but not actually make apportionments. So that is one of the reasons why we include it in there, so you don't include more than the authority on the unfunded list to not be committed beyond what's available.
Ms. Moore.
Is there a way to address the concern? Because I hear the concern being our list is $199 million, really not, because we've already apportioned some, but let's take that for theoretical. It's $199 million, and the last project comes in that would throw it to $202 million. And what the concern they have is that you could have a $202 million list because one of the 199 did their project less expensively, value engineered it, whatever, that money would be remaining and the last person could do a full project. So is there a way that we can accomplish not exceeding bond authority, but also not shortchanging the last project?
Ms. Silverman?
Well, I think in concept, I hear what you're saying, but I mean, you could basically, like you could consider the concept of emergency repair program, right? You accept applications up to that limit or authority, and once projects rescissions come in, you can potentially keep that project in abeyance. And if there is credit that comes back to the bond authority, then you have the ability to potentially fund additional projects. So I'm not sure. I mean, I think to some extent there is ability to create that cap, but also have the ability to, the flexibility once rescissions come back, then you could fund the next project like you would in joint use. Once you have cash that comes back to the program or authority back in the program, you can create another round or another cycle.
So,
but meanwhile, that last project reduced down by $2 million forever.
So what I was going to say is, so maybe we should consider, and you can comment on this, Lyle's recommendations say the applicant may accept the remaining funding amount. I mean, so in other words, if you've got a $5 million project and you've got $3 million, they can accept the $3 million and they stay on the list in case $2 million comes back and they get full funding. So we don't actually, I mean.
So kind of what you did before in another project, where you took a lower amount and then when money materialized, you were actually first on line for that.
Right.
So if that, we could do it.
There is no line.
I'm sorry, say that again.
There is no line.
There's no line, but it would allow you, if you accepted a lesser amount, would it not then allow you to receive the full funding if cash came back?
Right.
So,
right. So it only occurs in the case, as you pointed out, Lyle, where you would otherwise be eligible, would qualify for a pot of money, but the full funding is not there. You take that portion, with the hope and the prayer that somebody will provide some savings and not spend it on some activities that we're not allowed to do.
Does the staff believe that we can do that within the context of what the regulation is here now?
I think you could do as part of the board action.
Okay.
Make that as a requirement that if there are residual authority or rescissions that come back, that could be something that we would consider if a project did receive a haircut of some
Right.
sort.
Yeah. I would prefer to go that route just so that we don't delay the regulations. I would prefer that the regulations move forward as quickly as tomorrow and we get the clock going.
So could I suggest this as a friendly amendment, Senator Hancock, that we move and we say, because insufficient funding is available, the applicant may accept the remaining funding amount or refuse funding entirely. If partial funding is accepted, something along the lines is the applicant may receive additional funding if such funds become available. If funding is refused, the board will consider. So we just insert that sentence.
Is that doable? Ms. Senator Hancock, is that okay?
The concept is just fine.
Okay.
I agree with not wanting to delay. If people are comfortable putting that in and getting it off.
Okay.
No, we're just adding some, the language in subsection E remains the same. We're adding some additional verbiage.
No, the language would change slightly. If you go down to line 4, where it says, starts with is available, the applicant may, we're going to cross out the words either reduce their request to, and substitute may accept the remaining funding amount or refuse funding entirely. If partial funding is accepted, the applicant will remain eligible for additional funding if such funds become available. And then you'd have the sentence, if the funding is refused, the board shall, so if you can come up with better wording.
The idea is if there's any reversions or savings coming back, those would be, that applicant would be the first in line to get that.
Right.
And so how do we do it so that we as a board approve the regulations now, and so you folks who move forward, but that is the concept. Mr. Hagman.
I was going to say, can't we just give staff direction on that and accept the regs now so they're published? Just give staff direction to bring it back to us. If this scenario pops up, you can remind us of this conversation that the last one came in for $5 million. They only had 3. They got 3. They would like the other 2. If it comes in, we'll give it to them. That can even go out with the funding. I don't think you need to have in the regs.
I'm told we need to read it on the record now so it's part of the regulatory process and everybody's copacetic, particularly since we're doing emergency
Just
regs.
read it on the record.
So let's get that sentence correctly, Ms. Buchanan. Take a couple minutes just so that we all agree on what we're agreeing to.
Now, this is a program that hasn't gotten any money out the door, and we're worried about the last $2 million, right? I just want to understand what we're doing.
We're a troublemaker today. I think we're tired.
But I mean,
This is what happens at 7 with you.
I'm there, but
You only have
I
3
just want to put it
hours
in
of-
context.
Yeah, staff.
could be part of the board action, you know,
Okay. So
as opposed to
Ms. Jones is telling me I need to
Changing
read
the
it on the record.
The district will remain eligible for
If we're suggesting different language to be part of this reg,
up to the
her suggestion is correct. We should have it clear in the record what the language is that the board is approving to go forward.
And you're saying don't amend the language and point out
part
that
of
the
the
board
board
will provide.
action, right, as put as the action.
That's 2 options.
Buchanan?
One is not changing the regs.
One option is not to change the regs and just leave it as a board action later.
have it come back to us. at the next
No, just when the funds come in, it's a direction of the board to then provide for those funds when they come back.
Let me just see if this works for you, because if it does, it would make sense to me to get the regs right now.
But we need to get the regs in.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
you've got the one that says available, the applicant may accept the remaining funding amount or refuse funding entirely. I would say if partial funding is accepted, the district will remain eligible for additional funds up to the initial funding request if additional funds become available.
That, Mr. Mireles.
Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. There's two situations that this could
Additional seismic funds, we should probably say.
Well, because this would affect apportionments, cash, and projects being placed on the unfunded list. What I would need clarification is, are we talking about if a project gets placed on the unfunded list and we don't have enough authority, the remaining amount gets placed on the unfunded list, so that between the time that the project is on the unfunded list to the time that cash becomes available to get an apportionment, if money comes back, then they get the additional amount. That's scenario number one. Scenario number two is that they actually get an apportionment, and we don't have enough bonding authority for the apportionment, and we leave that project open for projects, for additional funds to come back later. So there's a distinction to be made between projects getting placed on the unfunded list versus projects actually getting authority, and whether we have.
I think the assumption was that we are not going to give an apportionment that exceeds
the money we have.
Bonding authority.
Right.
And that if you got to the very end, and we got lucky and everybody started coming in and these buildings are getting fixed, okay, and you got down to where you've got $3 million left, but the next request is for $5 million, that district could say, we're willing to take the $3 million, and then basically gamble on whether or not $2 million comes back through savings, in which case that if $2 million did, or however much came back, they would get that money up to their full request before we would
open it up for another project or two.
Right.
Okay, is that clear?
No longer being in, I'm not saying a word.
Yes.
Right. It has to be within the seismic authority. Let's
Yes.
be clear.
Yeah, we have, okay.
Right. So we can say if additional seismic funds become available, funding becomes available.
Okay, I just want to make sure we get it right because it's going to go out to administrative office tomorrow. Okay?
They rescind the project, the authority comes back.
All right.
Maybe just to be clear, why don't I ask Ms. Jones to read back her notes she's drafted?
Okay.
Make sure that we're getting, because she does shepherd
we all
these.
understand what we're.
She does shepherd these regulations through Office of Administrative Law for us. So.
I'd be happy to. I show that on the fourth sentence or fourth line after is available, the applicant may accept the remaining funding amount or refuse funding entirely. New sentence, if partial funding is accepted, the applicant will remain eligible for the additional amount of seismic funds if those funds become available.
Additional up to the project amount. Do we need that or not?
Okay, I think we
I
do.
don't know if
Okay.
we requested.
Yeah, I got you.
Right. I think that.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Ms. Senator Hancock, are you okay with that? The concept is there. It's been moved in second.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Roll call.
Let's do a roll call.
Okay, Senator Lowenthal. Senator Hancock. Assemblymember Brownlee. Brownlee. It was on aye? Okay. Assemblymember Buchanan. Assemblymember Hagman. Scott Harvey. Kathleen Moore. Pedro Reyes.
Aye.
Carries.
I would like to thank the staff and the subcommittee who worked on this so hard. They took a lot of time, a lot of testimony. Thank the participants who are in the audience now. There was a lot of good input, and I think we will be able to move some money out in a much-needed program. Good.
Mr. Chair?
Yes?
Before you adjourn the meeting, I wanted to record an aye vote on item 13.
Item 13, okay. Aye. Ms. Sue, did you get that? Okay.
And Mr. Chair, can
Yes.
I have before we conclude, I know that we did not take up the LYNWOOD case today, and they are not coming back before the board. However, I would like to ask that the chair and the vice chair consider an item that we look at relocation costs as part of site acquisition of multiple parcels, because I think that there's an equity issue involved there, and we ought to take another look at that.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm grateful to those folks who asked to be pulled from the line, from the agenda. Otherwise, we'd be here till 8. Just for our.
Just not to belabor
keep anybody any longer, but just on the Butte County issue, when we were discussing about the policy and requesting to look at that information, is that something that's going to come back, or is that, how would that go forward? There wasn't an actual vote on, the vote happened, but.
We will discuss it in the July meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Or as we get ready for the July.
Question about the constitutional.
No, it was about the policy about MEFs and the broader issues, and I am concerned about the constitutional language that got handed out without the others, the other statutory language as well. But it was mainly Ms. Moore's point about looking at this broader policy regarding if you are doing your due diligence, as Mr. Hageman pointed out, you don't want to deter that, but at the same time, what happens, what's the best course of action? If you add everything in at the beginning, how does that impact you? Or should it be more focused on MEFs? It's a broader
I
question.
think at some point we'll need to have maybe the implementation committee look at this issue moving forward. How do we do it so that folks can legitimately come in and ask for with the amenities that we're talking about, or if they can because of the cost, and you have savings that through being frugal and good fiduciary responsibility, you're able to do some cost savings. And how can you maximize or share or do something? I mean, that's
right.
That's the thing that we can do is maybe we split the savings. Maybe you come back at some point and prepared a plan B scenario that if funds were available, these are the things. But I don't think what we like to do is have staff go out there with the implementation committee and come and look at how can we resolve this so that people aren't penalized for being good stewards of the limited resources. On the same token, not have people take all that savings and keep other people from coming back.
I'd like to have that. Thank you.
Can I
Okay.
clarify? I'm sorry. One point with Kathleen Moore, you suggested that we have a follow-up item with the site issue specifically to the consultant fees. I just want to make sure that we're clear.
The relocation
consultant fees.
Correct, as part of relocation costs, and at the guidance of the chair and the vice chair as to workload on that. But I as a policy consideration.
Something for conversation. Mr. Hagman?
I was going to say on the previous comment that we had, I think that's the secret we need in government in general. The whole concept of spend it or lose it type of thing is on every level of government, and we need to put incentives anywhere we can for our government departments to work more efficiently and be able to share the savings for creativity and frugalness.
Senator Hancock.
I concur with Assemblymember Hagman's remarks, and I like your idea very much about this whole concept, things going to the implementation committee and coming back to us with some discussion and recommendations. And I would like then to pursue as well a look at the statute versus the Constitution in terms of county offices of education being able to put forward bonds and not necessarily having to be hardship.
100% hardship, because it is up to 100%, and I think as a board, for whatever reason, we've taken the position of doing the 100%. When you're absolutely right, they can't issue bonds.
Yeah, because different counties have different issues
Means.
about that. And I do think we're going to be running out of bond money, and we do not know at this point, given the state's financial situation, when anyone is going to be comfortable going out for more bond authority or for a new bond. So we need to look at everything.
Thank you. Thank you. Adjourn. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. No, I got to pull it because I usually leave this behind. So now you reminded me.